Hello again, and welcome to part 2 of Module 1 for ED621A. Now, after you've completed selecting your standard and unpacking your standard into a transfer goal, or goals, we're going to transform those goals into measurable objectives. So what's the difference between goals and objectives? Goals tend to be broad. They are general intentions. They give you a direction that you want to go. They're sort of abstract. They're not very concrete and not specific enough to measure. Whereas objectives are narrow. They have a clear focus. They are precise. They are concrete, and they can be measured specifically. And that has a lot to do with those magic verbs that we were looking at. So some of you have probably seen this, but this is the template that I use to look at how well your objectives are written. Are they specific? Are they measurable? Are they attainable? Are they relevant? And are they time-bound? Do they specifically give you an actionable item? Can you measure that action in some fashion with some kind of product? Is it attainable by the students? Is it reasonable within their scope of skill and ability after learning it that they're going to be able to meet the objective through the lesson? Is it relevant to the lesson? Is it relevant to their lives? Is it relevant to the world at large? If you think of text to self, text to text, and text to world, that's kind of the same routine. It has to be relevant across all levels. And time-bound. Can it be done in a reasonable amount of time? One of the things that Wiggins and McTighe warn us about is how we perceive the directive to use the prompt. The student will understand how to. Very often, teachers, student teachers, people developing curriculum have interpreted it as meaning to do something, which is not necessarily the case. It's actually a great source of confusion. People think learn how to is often used to identify discrete skills, writing in cursive, creating PowerPoint slides, 70% correct spelling, that kind of thing. These are not understandings. But people will place these in the knowledge and skills field thinking that this is somehow what learn how to do is supposed to look like. This is not where we want to go with objectives. For this framework that we're using, understand how to refers to an array of skills that require thoughtful attention to underlying concepts and principles. Then, that's supposed to be the word then, we are dealing with understandings. So this is where we want to go with the objectives, to give that they require students to apply thoughtful attention to underlying concepts and principles. So what does that look like? Let's take a look at these social studies transfer goals. We have a few. Describe the purpose and goals of the Constitution of the United States. It's pretty abstract, pretty broad. We want students to exercise political participation by discussing public issues, building consensus, becoming involved in political parties and campaigns, and voting. We want students to establish and apply criteria useful in evaluating rules and laws. We want students to establish, explain, and apply criteria useful in selecting political leaders. This would definitely be a good focus in this day and age, in these days. We want students to be able to explain the value of community service. We want students to be able to implement ways of solving problems and resolving conflict. All of these are goals based on one large social studies standard. So how do we turn these transfer goals, which are, if we look back at our chart, which I'm not going to scroll back, but they're broad, they're not non-specific, they're general, they give us a very general direction, but they give us a direction as opposed to the standard, which is just sort of this big statement. We want students to be able to do something with these, and that's what the objectives are. How are they going to apply their understanding? Well, the first thing we're going to do is actually unpack the transfer goals. We're looking at skills and knowledge. If you look at the template in Understanding by Design, the template that we're using for this format, objectives are broken up into skills and knowledge. So let's look at the kind of skills and knowledge that these goals are looking at. We have process skills. Exercise, establish, become involved, build consensus, apply, evaluate, select, vote. All of these particular skills, these verbs, require a process. And what is that process? That has to be specified. It has to be described or articulated. What's the content knowledge of these goals? Well, here's a list of the content knowledge involved in the transfer goals that we just looked at. The Constitution of the United States, political parties, political campaigns, rules and laws, public leaders, community service, ways of solving problems, ways of conflict resolution. So all these have a definite core of meaningful material that creates the content for these. And then there's the academic language and skills that are required to use and access these things. Describing and explaining, discussing, or example, a term consensus. What does that term mean? So you're looking at academic vocabulary. All process and content vocabulary would fall under the academic language piece. So when you're thinking of your objectives, all of this is going to lead to a thoughtful application of their understanding of the content. For future use, I'm just bringing your attention to the possibilities across content levels. This is a social studies standard with social studies goals. How can you transform these or integrate these into a language arts so that there's a relationship between the social studies and the language arts? How to structure, for example, how to structure an effective explanation, a writing or an oral explanation. How can you make the connection with science? You can talk about community service and how environmental legislation affects community service and community resources. In health, how does conflict resolution and developing consensus create a healthy, vibrant civil society? Because, even within the family unit, not just a school unit or a political unit in the community or a political unit at large. Or math, voting and marketing, all about numbers. What about proportions and reading graphs and looking at trends? So all of these things can be applied across content areas. So you want to keep that in the back of your mind for when you're starting to work on your units. So we'll go back to our transfer goals. Here they are again. And now I'm going to make the relationship of these with objectives. We're going to narrow them in. So we're looking at creating objectives that involve knowledge and skills, what students should know and what students should be able to do. You see the brain, the knowing, and the students working at different things. What should they be able to do? Do these knowledge and skills require thoughtful attention to underlying concepts and principles? And then can you use this objective across content areas? Most of the time the answer is yes. You have to be creative. So my little arrows, or I'm going to narrow this, I'm going to actually further refine this, but for the moment, I want you to look at what students should know. So we have, these are more specific than the goals. They should know the basic purpose of the U.S. Constitution. They should know why the Founding Fathers thought it was important to have a Constitution. They should know the way bills of rights affect our everyday lives. The Bill of Rights affects our everyday lives. They should know these are all different objectives. The process used for voting for elected officials. They should know how laws can help citizens resolve conflicts. So these are all knowledge. Now the process and the language skills are what students should be able to do with that knowledge when they're done with your lesson, or lessons, and in the case of your unit, eventually your unit. For the first three knowledge objectives, they all lead to the first skill objective, which is extract and summarize information from readings about the Constitution for a chart, diagram, or infographic presentation. What you'll notice is that is measurable. You've got the chart, diagram, or infographic are going to be your measurement. It's specific. Constitution. It's attainable. The students will be able to do this in a period of time. It's relevant to the content you're teaching, and it's time-bound if you organize it well into a reasonable amount of time. Read and recite the preamble of the Constitution also fits within these first three objectives. And this is a very low-level, higher order thinking skill, but many people do not know what and how the Constitution starts. And it's a very good memorization technique. Would teach memorization skills and a technique to know what starts the Constitution. The principle and the purpose of the Constitution is in the preamble. For voting, we have 2 different skills objectives. Evaluate the positive and negative differences between 2 candidates running for office based on their own position and voting for candidates based on a specific platform. For how laws help citizens resolve conflicts, they need to know that the Bill of Rights are, and they need to be able to explain how laws are important to civil society. Those are 2 different objectives for 2 different objectives, for the 2 different skill objectives for the knowledge objectives. So how is that going to look on your template? What I've done is I've created a box. In Wiggins and McTighe, he separates knowledge and skills into 2 separate boxes, and I've been doing that for years, but I've decided that I haven't seen people make the relationship between knowledge and skills that need to be made in terms of developing understanding. So you take the knowledge, this is how I want it to look, and this would be just one goal, one objective for the goal that you've chosen. And for the lessons you're teaching for this particular module, Module 1 and ED621A, all you need is one set of objectives. So each one of these is a set of objectives, and you can teach a couple of lessons to each of these objectives. So the knowledge that you want students to come out with, for example, would be the basic purpose of the Constitution. They need to know this. And what are they going to do? What are the skills they're going to use to demonstrate their knowledge of this, or is extract and summarize information to make this presentation? Or the objective can be how laws can help citizens resolve conflicts. The knowledge is, when they come out of this, is how laws can help citizens resolve conflicts, and specifically how and skills explain how the laws are important for a civil society. So these are directly related to each other, and this is what you're going to end up assessing and end up teaching. And the third example for a set of objectives for the knowledge would be the process used for voting for elected officials. And then the skill would be to actually vote for the candidates based on specific platform information. So this is going to require some process on the part of the students, but this is what you're going to teach. You're going to teach them how to do this so that they will have this knowledge and this skill when they're done. So the objectives are the knowledge and skills you want students to come out with when they're done with the lessons. And this is what it's going to look like on your template. This is one objective set, this is one objective set, this is one objective set, and that's all you need is just one for the set of 2 lessons that you're creating for this particular ED621A. So we're here. Here's your set. Here's your template. We are here. This is the place where you're going to put your objectives for this lesson, these 2 lessons that you're going to be creating. And based on the content of Module 1 and your readings of this PowerPoint, you're going to design the objectives for your lesson, the key knowledge and skills that are directly aligned with your transfer goal. Add these objectives to your lesson design template along with your selected standard and transfer goal, and submit your work on time to the assignment Dropbox. And then next week for Module 2, we're going to kind of backtrack a little bit, and we're going to look at enduring understandings, essential questions, and the big idea of your lesson and ultimately your unit. So with that, you can create your objectives. I look forward to getting your work at the end of Module 1.